Dear child, have you ever wondered why your heart suddenly feels restless today? As if someone is silently calling your name from far away? There is a reason you were guided to this message at this exact moment. Nothing about today is ordinary. The person you love has been carrying emotions too heavy to hide any longer, and time is moving faster than either of you realizes. This message is not about fear, it is about a truth that has waited far too long to be spoken. If you ignore it now, you may never fully understand what was meant to reach your heart. Listen carefully, because what I am about to share is not a coincidence. While the world around you has continued as if nothing has changed, the heart of the person you love has been quietly fighting a battle no one else can see. They have replayed your memories over and over, wondering if there is still a path leading back to you. Every sunrise has brought them another chance to speak, yet every sunset has taken away a little more courage. They have whispered silent prayers, hoping that somehow your heart would feel what their words could never fully explain. They are not asking for perfection. They are asking for one final opportunity to let the truth be known. Don't skip, because what happens next changes everything. The person you love recently came across something that reminded them of a promise they once made in their heart, a promise they believed had already been lost forever. That single moment awakened emotions they had buried beneath years of silence and regret. Since then, they have felt an overwhelming urgency to reach you, as if an invisible clock has begun counting down. They fear that if this moment passes without you knowing the truth, the distance between you may become harder to cross than ever before. And the most surprising part is, they still believe you are the only person who can understand what they have never been able to tell anyone else. The memory refused to leave their heart. Every ordinary moment had started feeling strangely connected to you, as if the smallest reminder carried the weight of an entire lifetime. They tried to convince themselves that moving forward was the only sensible choice, yet every step away from the past somehow brought them closer to your name. Nights became longer than they had ever imagined. Sleep came only in short moments before another memory interrupted the silence. It wasn't because they wanted to suffer, it was because they had never truly found peace after losing the person they believed understood them better than anyone else. Don't skip, because what happened next changed the direction of everything they thought they knew. One quiet afternoon, while sorting through a collection of forgotten belongings, they discovered something they hadn't seen in years. It wasn't valuable because of its appearance. It wasn't expensive or extraordinary. Yet the moment they held it in their hands, every wall they had built around their emotions began to collapse. The object carried a memory so vivid that it felt as though time itself had folded back to the day when hope still seemed possible. For several long minutes, they simply stared at it, unable to speak, realizing that some promises never truly disappear, no matter how many years pass. Questions they had buried deep inside suddenly returned with overwhelming force. What if the story had never truly ended? What if silence had been created by misunderstanding instead of choice? What if both hearts had been waiting, believing the other had already let go? Those thoughts became impossible to ignore. They replayed every conversation, every goodbye, every missed opportunity, searching for the exact moment where everything had gone wrong. As evening arrived, they made a quiet decision. For the first time in a very long while, they stopped running from their feelings. Instead, they accepted something that frightened them even more than rejection, the possibility that there was still time to tell the truth. They didn't know whether you would listen. They didn't know whether the distance between your lives had already become too great. But they knew they could no longer remain silent. Far away, completely unaware of this decision, your own day continued as normal. Yet there was a strange feeling you couldn't explain. Certain memories appeared without invitation. Familiar emotions resurfaced for reasons that made no logical sense. It felt as though life itself was preparing both of you for a moment neither of you expected to face again. And then, just as they gathered the courage to take the first step toward reaching out, someone unexpected appeared with information that could change everything they believed about the past. The unexpected visitor did not rush to speak. They simply stood there for a long moment, studying the expression on the face of the person you love as though they already understood the storm hidden behind their silence. The room suddenly felt smaller. Even the sound of the clock on the wall seemed louder than before. Something about this meeting felt different, as if it had been waiting to happen for years. When the visitor finally spoke, their voice carried no anger, no excitement, only the quiet certainty of someone who had been holding on to an important truth for far too long. "I think it's finally time you knew what really happened." Those words landed heavier than anyone could have imagined. Every unanswered question, every painful memory, every lonely night suddenly seemed connected to whatever was about to be revealed. The person you love remained completely still, afraid that even one movement might interrupt the truth they had spent years searching for. Deep inside, they were already preparing themselves for an answer that might change the way they remembered the past forever. Don't skip. Because the next few moments uncovered something neither heart had ever expected. The visitor carefully unfolded an old envelope that had remained sealed for years. It wasn't decorated with anything special. There was no dramatic appearance that suggested it carried life-changing information. Yet the handwriting on the front immediately caught their attention. It was familiar. Painfully familiar. For a brief second, they couldn't breathe. Their hands began to tremble as memories rushed back faster than they could control. Every emotion they had tried to bury returned at once. Inside the envelope was a message that had never reached its destination. It spoke of honesty instead of betrayal, hope instead of goodbye, and patience instead of giving up. Line after line revealed that decisions both of you believed were made willingly had actually been shaped by misunderstandings, silence, and the influence of people who never wanted your paths to meet again. The realization struck like lightning. So much pain had been built upon a story that had never been completely true. The person you love closed their eyes as tears quietly gathered. They weren't crying because the memories hurt. They were crying because they suddenly understood how much precious time had been stolen by assumptions that neither of you had created. Every missed opportunity, Every unanswered question, every lonely birthday and every silent holiday suddenly carried a completely different meaning. For the first time in years, regret was no longer the strongest emotion in their heart. Determination replaced it. They realized that the past could never be changed, but the future was still unwritten. If there was even the smallest chance that your heart remained open, they were willing to face every obstacle standing between you. Fear no longer seemed as powerful as the thought of remaining silent forever. As midnight approached, they made a decision they had avoided for years. They reached for something they had promised themselves they would never touch again, a forgotten way to reach you, hidden away because they believed it would never matter anymore. Their fingers hesitated only for a moment before moving forward. And just as they were about to send the very first message, a single notification appeared on the screen. It contained only one sentence. Don't contact them, because they still don't know the truth about what happened after you disappeared. Everything stopped. And the name of the person who sent that warning was someone both of you trusted more than anyone else. The notification remained on the screen, but neither of them could find the courage to touch it. The person you love stared at the unfamiliar silence surrounding those few words, wondering why a warning had arrived at the exact moment they had finally decided to reach out to you. It felt impossible to ignore. Their heartbeat grew louder with every passing second, and countless questions rushed through their mind. Why now? Why after all these years? And what truth could still be hidden that was powerful enough to stop them from sending the message they had waited so long to write? Don't skip. Because what happened next uncovered a secret that had remained buried beneath years of carefully protected silence. With trembling hands, they opened the notification. Attached to it was a short voice recording. There were only a few seconds of audio, but those few seconds carried more weight than an entire lifetime of unanswered questions. A familiar voice spoke quietly, almost as if they were afraid someone else might overhear. If you're listening to this, it means the truth has finally found its way back to you. None of this happened the way you believed. Someone made sure you would never hear the whole story. The recording ended abruptly. No explanation. No names. Only a silence that felt heavier than the words themselves. The person you love replayed the recording again. And again. Searching for something they might have missed. Each time they listened, the same realization grew stronger. For years they had blamed themselves. They believed they had failed you. They believed they had been abandoned because they weren't enough. But now, another possibility stood before them. Someone had quietly manipulated events until both of you believed the other had walked away willingly. The thought was almost unbearable. Every memory suddenly looked different. Conversations that once seemed ordinary now carried hidden meaning. Small misunderstandings that had once been ignored now appeared carefully placed, as though invisible hands had guided every misunderstanding toward the same painful ending. It wasn't one single lie that separated two hearts. It was dozens of tiny lies, spread over time until they became impossible to recognize. As dawn slowly approached, they could no longer remain inside the house. They stepped outside, letting the cool morning air clear their thoughts. The streets were almost empty, yet everything around them felt strangely alive. Every passing breeze reminded them of a promise they had never truly broken. Deep inside, they realized something important. If someone had worked this hard to keep both of you apart, then perhaps your connection had always been stronger than either of you had understood. That single realization gave them courage. Instead of deleting your contact once again, they held onto it tighter than ever before. They whispered quietly to themselves that no matter what happened next, they would not let fear make another decision for them. If the truth was finally coming into the light, then they owed it to both hearts to face it completely. Just as they prepared to leave, another envelope slipped from between the pages of the old journal they had been carrying all night. Unlike the first envelope, this one had your name written across the front. And beneath your name was one chilling sentence: "Open only after you learn who betrayed both of you." The person you love slowly turned the envelope over, then froze. The seal had already been broken. The broken seal changed everything. For several long moments, the person you love couldn't even bring themselves to open the envelope completely. Their mind raced with impossible questions. If this letter had been meant for you, then who had opened it first? More importantly, why had no one ever told either of you that it existed? The envelope looked old, its edges softened by time, as though it had been hidden away for years. Whoever had handled it before had done so carefully, leaving almost no trace behind. Yet one thing was obvious: the truth inside had never reached the heart it was written for. Don't skip. Because the next discovery explained why so many years had disappeared without answers. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first line alone was enough to bring tears to their eyes. If you are reading this, then fate has finally undone the silence that was forced upon us. They slowly continued reading. Every sentence painted a picture that neither of you had ever been allowed to see. The letter spoke about promises that had never been broken, about feelings that had never faded, and about decisions that had never truly belonged to either of you. Someone had intercepted messages, hidden conversations, and twisted simple misunderstandings into permanent separation. Every small lie had been placed like another stone in a wall built to keep two hearts apart. The person you love stopped reading for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of the words. They looked out the window as the morning sunlight filled the room, wondering how different life could have been if this single letter had arrived on time. For years, both of you had blamed yourselves. For years, both of you had believed the other had chosen to walk away. But neither of you had ever been given the complete truth. As they reached the final page, something unexpected slipped onto the floor. It wasn't another letter. It was a faded photograph. The picture showed a moment from long ago, a day filled with genuine smiles, before confusion, distance, and silence had taken over. Written on the back of the photograph was a date. And beneath it, one heartbreaking sentence. This was the last day both of you believed the lies hadn't won. Their hands trembled. That was the exact day everything had begun to change. It could not be a coincidence. Someone had deliberately preserved this evidence, waiting for the right moment for it to be discovered. Taking a deep breath, the person you love realized there was only one thing left to do. No more guessing. No more living inside unanswered questions. The truth had to be faced, no matter how painful it became. They gathered every letter, every photograph, every forgotten memory into a single folder. Then they looked at one final document still lying at the bottom of the envelope. Unlike everything else, it wasn't written by either of you. It carried only a signature. A signature belonging to the one person everyone had trusted without question. And beneath that signature, was a confession that began with 7 unforgettable words. I never thought you would discover what I did. The confession began with a sentence that no one was ever supposed to read. I never thought you would discover what I did. But I can no longer carry this guilt alone. The person you love stood frozen as every line unfolded. The writer admitted that years ago, fear, jealousy, and pressure had led them to interfere in a relationship they believed would never survive. They had hidden letters, delayed messages, encouraged misunderstandings, and remained silent whenever the truth could have brought both of you back together. What began as one selfish decision slowly became a chain of lies that neither of you could see. With every paragraph, the weight inside their heart grew heavier. They realized that the years of silence had never been proof that love had disappeared. They had simply been living inside a story written by someone else's choices. Don't skip. Because the final truth is the one that changes everything. Instead of feeling anger, the person you love felt something unexpected, peace. Not because the past no longer mattered, but because they finally understood it. For the first time in years, they stopped blaming themselves. They stopped wondering whether they had not been enough. They stopped believing that you had willingly walked away. The truth had finally answered the questions that had haunted both hearts for so long. That same evening, they wrote one final message. It wasn't filled with dramatic promises. It wasn't an attempt to erase the past. It simply said, "If life has taken us too far apart, I will respect your journey. But I could not allow another day to pass without telling you the truth. You deserved honesty from the beginning. Whatever you choose after this, I will always be grateful that the silence finally ended." They read the message one last time, took a deep breath, and pressed send. There was no expectation. No demand. Only honesty. Minutes passed. The screen remained silent. Then, a notification appeared. Your name. Their hands trembled as they opened it. Your reply was short, but it carried more hope than they had dared to imagine. I never stopped wondering what really happened. Thank you for finally telling me the truth." In that single moment, years of confusion began to lose their power. Not because every wound disappeared overnight, but because truth had finally replaced silence. The past could never be rewritten. The lost years could never be returned. Yet both of you were finally free from the burden of believing a lie. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not turning back time. It is finding the courage to face the truth before it's too late.